I just want to share that my talk today, I hope, will bring you some pieces to put together everything that we've done during this week. It is not a list. It's not a list of keys to leadership. Instead, we will be weaving a cloth. Do you understand? Okay. So I will be giving you some stories and pieces that help to weave together some concepts that have to do with leadership. And before I begin, I do want to share with you some news. So 2 days ago, after I left the U.S. to come here, I received a letter by email to say that I have dreamed for several years of having an institute for all of us. And I've dreamed of it being on every continent so that school leaders in Montessori have places to go to continue to learn. It's missing in our industry, in our work. And the letter informed me that the first bit of money to fund such an institute is coming. And so it's not my institute, it will be your institute. And I am hoping that Lead Montessori will be telling you about it and the beginning of it. And I'm hoping and dreaming that it will grow to the point where you come to training and take that back and start your own university, your own institute in your own country, so that we grow as a group of people who understand what it is to lead a school and run a school, so that the teachers and the staff and the children can thrive. So this will help a great deal in growing our movement in Montessori. So that's the big news. And so you will hear more about it. Okay. All right. Okay, so I can't see my screen. Is that what happens? I have to look up there. Yeah. All right. Okay, that's not good because I can't read. So we're going to be looking with new eyes at leadership. We started out talking about how we would get away from a mechanistic view of the world, which Montessori did 100 years ago. And so in leadership also, we have to get away from this machine view of the world and have new eyes, bring the sciences that we have today into how we see running a school and leading a school. And so we will be weaving these threads in order to understand human systems. In other words, when I say human systems, I mean the way that humans come together in a group. You know, because it's fairly simple to work individually, but it's complicated to work with a whole group of humans. And that's what our work really is. So there's a quote from Peter Senge that is so meaningful to Montessori. He says, "It is common to say that trees come from seeds, but how could a tiny seed create a huge tree? Seeds do not contain the resources needed to grow a tree. Where are those resources? These come from the medium or the environment within which the tree grows." Does that resonate with you? But the seed does provide something that is crucial, a place where the whole of the tree starts to form. In a sense, the seed is the gateway through which the future possibility of the living tree emerges. So we know the seed is the embryo, and the living tree continues to flourish into adulthood. So in Montessori, our focus, our purpose is the child. But actually, our work as leaders is primarily with the adults. And to understand that that adult is still growing and still developing. And that's the work that we guide as leaders. So the child is one of the most important, our most important work. It is the child's self-formation. The Montessori environment is built and intangible. It is the psychic and the prepared environment, and that is the catalyst for that formation. That's our work of the child. But the adult has a most important work too. It is self-transformation. If the adult's basic needs are met and the work environment, built and intangible, is uniquely prepared by us as leaders, it will act as a catalyst for the adult's growth and development. The leader's role is to prepare and guide this adult environment. That's what our work is. And so what does it mean when you come to your workplace? What is that like? How have you as the leader prepared that environment so that your teachers are nourished and cared for and guided so that they can be the best they can be with the child? So here's a list of things that are a leader's role. You know, there's lots of lists in the world. The 7, the 11, the 8, the 12 lists. And so I just did a little bit of my own brainstorming and came up with this list. The leader's role is most important to prepare and guide the adult environment. It is also the role of managing oneself. And I think you've heard that over and over in this week. It starts with us. It starts with the inner self so that we can be there for others. And then it is acting with authenticity. In other words, being able to be who we are rather than just a role. And there's a wonderful guidance from a person that mentored me. And she said that if you are a good leader, you are fair, you are firm, you are kind, and you are clear. Those 4 words I had on my desk, I had it in my office, I have it at home in my bedroom. It is always a reminder to me when I'm thinking about what maybe didn't go well at school. Was I fair? Was I firm? Was I kind? And was I clear? So those are pieces that of the way that we are interacting with people that are very important. Somehow, often we want to please everyone, but we have to be firm. So another piece of this list is we facilitate adults through a meaningful process. So you have experienced some reflection process, some small group process. You've done a lot of those kinds of things while you were here. We didn't just stand here and talk at you. Is that right? Yeah. And so with your teachers, with your staff, you have to become capable of facilitating ways for them to do the same thing. That's facilitation. So your role as a guide becomes in part a facilitator. So you have to learn those methods. The better you get at those methods, the more integrated the understanding and learning of your staff will be. So another piece of our role is to guide adults to their true potential. We think it's only the child, but if the adult is not moving towards their potential, then they are not going to serve the child in the best possible way. We have to know how to build trust. It doesn't just happen. You don't just stand up at a meeting and say, all right, we all have to trust one another. It doesn't work that way. There is science and knowledge to building trust. And so we use that knowledge to build trust and to build community. We have to know what we're doing. So that's a big part of leadership. We have to understand a community, a group of human beings, as a living social system. In other words, it's each individual, but it's also how they all work together, how they all interact together. And we have to know what that's about. And today, there is so much knowledge in this area. We have to be able to create an interconnected emotional field. And I'm going to talk more about that this morning. But we all know that emotion runs through the whole family. Emotion runs through the whole school. And when someone is upset, it is like catching a cold. It spreads, right? Yes. And so we have to know what that is and how to position ourselves so that we can help to heal that. That's part of leadership. And we have to know how to create culture. In other words, we have culture in our country, but we have culture in our school. And so we are the ones that are guiding that culture. And culture is based on our values, what we value, and it's based on what we believe. So in a school over many years, as you are taking care of your school over many years, you will find that there's this group over here of teachers who have a value and have a belief, and then there's new younger teachers who come in the door and they have a different value and a different belief. And so how do you get everybody all in the same values and beliefs? And how do you keep it that way? That is guiding a culture. So just having that understanding. When I came to my school in Washington, D.C., one teacher had been there for 47 years. Wow. That's right. Yes, her name was Reena Chakrabarty. She is beautiful. Inga has known her. She came from India with 2 science degrees and was brilliant. And so she held a part of the culture of that school. And we had to find a way for the new teachers who are coming in to understand and know the culture of the school. So that Reena's understanding didn't get pushed to the side, but rather it was all integrated. So that's just a little piece on culture, but we can learn more and more about that. And then we have to be able to communicate how the adults behave together. So some of you in my group and in Sue's group, we talked about building a charter of commitment, where as a staff community, all the teachers together, we decide how we're going to behave together. How are we going to interact together? What are our agreements about that? That's so important, because if we don't have an agreement about that, then there will be negative emotion that we have that will affect children, that will affect the child. So they don't know the details if you've had a conflict with another teacher, but they feel it. So that's why it's so important. So this is just a piece of understanding, and you can spend many years studying this work. It turns out that when Montessori died, Dr. Robert Kegan at Harvard began his research. And he knew that she had stopped with a development at the young adult. And that's where he began his work. And so for the past 30 years, Robert Kegan and several other researchers have studied the stages of adult development. And those stages, they begin in an egocentric stage. And they grow to a more cosmic-centric stage. And they can grow to a unitive stage. I think the end point of adult development is maybe the Dalai Lama. but we don't get there. Well, so if we know about this knowledge, I'm going to show you what it looks like here. Yeah. These are the stages that he identified: the socialized mind, the self-authoring mind. In other words, you are really authoring yourself. You are authentic, and you notice yourself with others. And then the post-conventional stage is the self-transforming mind. So it turns out that in adult development, it doesn't happen by age. You don't just get older and get more developed. It doesn't happen that way. It happens in several ways. One way is if you have a tragedy in your life, if you have a time that's very difficult, that may help you move to a next stage. If you have a coach or a mentor or someone older and more mature who's helping you with your life in your profession, then that can help you move to a more developed state. So Sue did the work of the young teacher. They generally are in that egocentric stage. And you are there to guide them to move to greater maturity. So it's a very interesting field, and knowing it is helpful, because then working with your staff, it's not annoying if somebody is less mature. It's understanding it and knowing that it's your job to help to guide them. So then you have more knowledge about the people that you are leading. So Robert Kegan said that our schools should be deliberately developmental on purpose. I talked about this when we first began on Thursday, that the school is going through stages of its development, and we are going through our stages, and the teachers are, and the children are. So everyone is developing, everyone is growing. And you have to know there's no there, because it's always that work. That's the forever work of leading a school. And one of the ways that you're able to do that is from a Montessori pedagogical perspective, you're removing the obstacles to growth for everyone and for the school. You are working for growth, you're working for joy, and you're working for development, and and for fulfillment, for thriving. So that gives you just a whole different way of seeing a school. So what does it mean? Individually, we can continue to grow and develop and transform from one plane to another. And by the way, Robert Kegan identified these not as stages, but they identified them as planes. They have psychological characteristics. They do. So we can move from one plane to another if supported by having a deliberately developmental mindset about the adults in our school. And we can create intentionally conscious, loving communities where the adults interact in ways that we nurture the children who are there. So that's a hope for a school to be that way. This is an interesting piece of information. A man named McGregor wrote a book called The Human Side of Enterprise. In other words, business, the human side of business. He said that our assumptions about human nature determine how we lead. So theory X assumes that people are dependent. And theory Y assumes people want responsibility and they want to learn and grow and discover based on natural tendencies. Well, it's amazing that that's, what Montessori said. Somehow when we get to the adult side of the business, we seem to think that's not important, but actually it is. So whatever leadership mindset you have is what will be the self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think that the teachers are dependent on you, and they might be for a while when you're first starting your school, but you want to move to empower them to take responsibility and want to keep learning and growing. So it depends on what's in your mind, how that's going to turn out. So he also said that a great deal of organizational conflict is structural. That's a big phrase. So when we are all together and people have conflict, he says it has to do with the way the meeting is structured, rather than that it's in people necessarily. So here's what that looks like. When you are working with the fact that you don't all agree, in preparing the environment for the adults, for the meeting, you control the structure rather than the people. So you prepare the process of the meeting in a way that helps people to work through conflict rather than thinking, oh, it's all their fault. It's really our fault if we haven't prepared that meeting, that environment in a way that helps everyone. That's really profound. So every time we get together as a group in our school, I've prepared that meeting. I've thought about it. I think about how it should go and what we should do and what steps we should follow so that I'm preparing this structure that's an environment rather than just putting everybody in a room and saying, let's talk about this. Let everyone be responsible. So yesterday you did open space technology and you saw the self-organizing that went on. You were responsible. I didn't do much. Peter sat in And Sue stood on the outside of a group that was working together and made a few comments, but you are responsible. Avoid taking anything personally. Well, that's very hard. We're all human. And then listen closely in those gatherings when there is conflict so that you can bring up what is unspoken. If you are really tuned in to your people, you're going to listen for what's unspoken and be able to say it. So all of these things require us to really hone these skills. They take many years. So we're weaving together philosophical, scientific, psychosocial, spiritual, and political threads here. And the framework for human potential is all of these things. How humans operate in relationship, how humans keep on developing after childhood. The theory of emergence informs how change happens, and understanding how human beings together are in well-being. Well, that's a lot of words. I'm going to take them apart. So, do you know about complexity theory and chaos theory? Have you heard about that in science? It began with Montessori. She was really the first quantum thinker. And now we have quantum physics. So we have it validated. And it's the understanding that things just keep emerging. The world is self-organizing. The universe is self-organizing. It's not under control. And from the Montessori perspective, if something very wrong arises in society, we can't necessarily fix it. But what we can do is start new to create what's good. So that's an approach to this constant emerging reality that happens in the universe. So we can't stomp out all the evil, but we can create as much as possible the good. That's what the theory of emergence is. So we've been focusing today on the adults in the human community. I'm just going to do right there. Okay. And we're getting away from industrial management, and we're moving into this understanding of quantum thinking, which is all about ecosystem. So this theory of emergence is, our first urge is always to fix it. Well, didn't we learn from the bonsai that we can't fix it? We can't fix it. We have to come to the base and then begin to prune and begin to work to try to figure out what is good so it can thrive. It's a beautiful metaphor, the bonsai. Montessori said this: the new human being must show us how to make all mankind aware of its unity amid the shadows of doubt and fear that hang heavily over the human race. We can now catch a glimpse of the light that will dissipate them, because a new society is already coming into being. A new humanity for a new world is already being born. So she saw the new child as the new hope for all that is wrong in the world. This is a student at my school who went to visit a third world environment and to nurture the little ones. Well, this is the new child. So one of the beautiful things that I learned came from South Africa. Who is from South Africa? Yes, okay, and here? Okay. And so this means a lot to me. In the Zulu tribes, they have a tradition. When you are walking along the path and you see another human being, you say, "Sawubona." It means, "I see you." And if you are a member of the tribe, you would answer, "Sikona." And it means, "I am here." The meaning is implicit in the language, and it is part of the spirit they call Ubuntu. So in Zulu, it means a person is a person because of other people. A person is a person because of other people. So the order of exchange is important. Until you see me, I do not exist. So you've heard throughout all these days this reflection of "I see you," and that's the meaning there. So I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor and say to them, "I see you," and your neighbor will answer, "I am here." Would you do that, please? I see you. Sawubona, Sikona. I love it. So, of course, this is something to use over and over in your community to truly see who is in front of you so that they exist. So we're going to move now to where are we now in our world, our political reality, and this theory of emergence. There's a lot of sadness in the world, isn't there? I want to share with you a prophecy that in the U.S. the Hopi elders have given us. The Hopi are an indigenous tribe in America. They were there long before the colonizers came to the U.S. And they have a wisdom. And so in 2000 they met, the elders did, the wise ones. And this is what they shared with us. And I'm going to need to stand around so I can read it. To my fellow swimmers, here is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid and will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say, "Let go of the shore. Push off into the middle of the river and keep our heads above water." And I say, "See who is there with you and celebrate." See who is there with us and celebrate. It's us. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that you do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we have been waiting for. You want to give that a hand? That's an enormous message to us Montessorians. So we've been talking a lot about understanding human community. That's a very difficult part of leading a school, and building trust and belonging. So let's go into that a little bit. One of the things that you develop as a leader is to become very good at observation. So this is an act of both inner and outer noticing. So you understand that you're noticing yourself when you are in community and how you are doing, and you're noticing what's happening with the others you are with. When you are not able to do that, you can become reactive rather than responsive. Those are two different things. So this is a life work. It's a life work. So here is the concept of noticing. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there is little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. It's very profound. Yes. So that's the motivation, to become very keen observers of life. To notice. So you will discover that as you have conversations in various groups, there are wise ones who know this, and they will say, oh, noticing. It's almost like there's a code language there. Yeah. So noticing in part has to do with you in your community, close up, but also your ability to get above and to be able to look at all the patterns going on in your community. Oops, there's here. There he is. He's up there looking out over Prague. And so in looking at patterns, you're actually looking at how things interact in such a way that they produce a pattern over time. This is science. It's systems science. And so when there are disconnects, when people are not connected, you'll start to see things dissolve and go away. So you need all of this to make a true community. You need parents and teachers and children all interconnected. It's an ecosystem, just like the natural ecosystem. So what are the characteristics of a community? It has distinct individuals, they're each unique, and it has people linked together, and the people become greater than the whole. We know this. And so when you're up on that balcony looking down, you see the dance. This is the ballroom. And this is the dance of the whole school. If you have an infant community all the way up to an adolescent community, these are all of the micro communities dancing in the ballroom. And you are able to see from this perspective the patterns, what you see. So that kind of observing you can develop over time. You're not just in it, you actually can look at it from the whole. So think about that going back. That's a new discipline. And so as you're walking to school, this is my granddaughter. And she was 2, and her guide had her hands behind her back when she walked through the environment. And so, and And so that's very typical of Montessori guides at that level. And so she walked like her guide. But that's you on your way to school. And you think about all of this swirling human activity. All of it is going on. And yeah, I love this. And this is God up on the cloud. And God says, it's not my fault. I turned my back for just a minute and everything started evolving. And that's planet Earth. So you have to be patient with yourself because this is all very human work. And it's not under your control. It is, you do your best to guide it, just like the Montessori environments. So from physics at the quantum level, all things are interconnected, deeply interconnected. This is called unified theory. Have you heard about that in science? Yes. And so groupings of things influence each other into forms, and these forms create patterns over time. Even chaos has pattern. Did you know that? Chaos has pattern. It has beautiful fractals. So Montessori said that the universe is self-organizing, and we know from science now that it is. At all levels of life, systems self-organize. They connect, they reflect, they regenerate, they connect again. They're co-evolving. So the science really is applicable to what we do. And science tells us that self-organizing systems flow near the edge of chaos. This is the Montessori classroom. It flows on the edge of chaos. That's why it's so difficult to be a guide. But it is self-organizing, so it stabilizes itself and balances itself. And when we gather with adults, we have the same type of thing going on. So in our Montessori organic model, we have to ask, what does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to have well-being? And I just wanted to give you a little view of this so that you have it actually defined. So well-being is when a healthy community is integrated. Well, what does integrated mean? Okay? Integrated means each individual is differentiated. In other words, I see you. You see each person. Each person is unique and differentiated. Is that a word you can get? Yes. And then that it is well linked and connected. It has to be both. You have to have both. You have to be differentiated and you have to be linked and connected. So that makes a healthy community. So this is taking the science and looking at it in this way. So here's a great way to use for a diagnostic tool. So well-being, what does it look like in a community? Dr. Daniel Siegel, who is a neuropsychologist, has created the acronym FACES. And so FACES is F-A-C-E-S in English. You could do it in your own language. And the F stands for flexible. So if your community is flexible, it's healthy. If your community is adaptive, in other words, it can adapt to changes or things that happen, that's about being a healthy community. Or it can recover from something that happens. Is it coherent? Is everybody there clear about why you're there? Is there coherence? And the E stands for energy. Is it energized? Or are you seeing it become fatigued and tired? And so that, if it keeps going that way, it's going to lead to illness. It's not going to be healthy. And is it stable? So humans seek equilibrium. They need balance. So they're always seeking to make stability. And if you have a pretty rocky situation in your school and it's not stable, that is not healthy. So you use this on a daily basis as a test of how you're doing. And you figure out what needs to be helped. It's a good thermometer. So if it isn't healthy, what does it look like? Well, one of the biggest signs is when the humans stop being differentiated. You know what that means? A bunch of teachers meet over at their house and have a secret meeting. Instead of coming to the school and all sharing what the worry is. Actually, that happened to me my first year of teaching. There was a secret meeting, and I witnessed it. I'll never forget it. And so the person who was running the school was not invited. So that's when you have humans herding. They get into a herd. And they stop having their own voice. They have a voice as a group. Okay? So that's a sign. And also people stop being truly connected. You know, they avoid each other. They don't go to each other if they have an issue. They go and tell somebody else. Or both. So these are little signs of when things aren't going very well. And you want to bring it back to healthy. And then what are the signs when a community is showing signs of trouble? Well, it can get rigid, or it could be chaotic, or it could be both. When people get very stiff and they resist anything, that's a sign that they're not flexible and not adaptive. They're rigid. So you've got this in your notes. It's an awful lot to take in, but you can go back and look at it and use this as a test of the healthy community that you have. So this is all we're talking about is change. So today we all know that the rate of change is going faster than it ever did. What does that do to human beings? It's very hard, isn't it? Yes, we all feel it. And so because the rate of change goes so fast, actually school parents have higher anxiety. I have to tell you, at my school in Washington, D.C., it has a wall, a brick wall that goes around it. It was actually built by the Catholic Church. So they made the bricks have openings in the sign of a cross all the way around. Well, and then it is on the outside, and the playground is right on the inside, just like this. And the first week of school, I will come out on the playground and see parents with their binoculars looking through the crosses, the openings. Yes, for real. Yeah. And so these parents are saying, whatever you do, don't let him sense our anxiety. Oops. Oh, wait. Okay, there. So the whole point is we have to reinvent this idea of leadership. We can't have control over everybody. We can guide everybody. So what this has to do with is the integrity and the authenticity of our own self while being connected to others. That is leadership. It's the integrity and the authenticity of myself while staying connected to everyone. I could come to school and go in the back door and avoid everyone. Sometimes there's a homeless person there, but in Washington, D.C., that's a typical thing that can happen. But I can avoid the staff. Let them just go do their work. But I have to show up. I have to be me. And they have to know I'm being myself and that I am there for them and I am connected to them. So actually, your power resides in your presence, in the nature of your being, not in something that you invent about yourself. It's you being truly you. You be you. That's an old saying. The power of yourself has to do with you truly being yourself. It isn't about managing others. It's about managing yourself. Does that resonate? Yes. Yeah. It's about managing oneself, not other people. So that's a whole other concept. I love the image of the mobile because it reminds me that in being present, being here now, I have an effect on the movement of this whole mobile. So how I stand and where I am and how I move in connection with others, causes the movement of the mobile. Oops. Okay. I'm going to give you, let's see, I still have enough time. Okay. This is a little lesson on evolution. Who's elementary trained? Okay. All right. This is my own silly, this is not a Montessori timeline. Understand that. And this is a friend of mine who illustrated this. She helped me with this. So this timeline of life here. So we know that the first forms of life were prokaryotes. You know that, right? Elementary guides know that. So they were self-reproducing. They had no consciousness. They didn't know they were there. And they had no ability to join other life forms. That must have been pretty awful. Or not. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny. Okay, so here's the next step. Along came the eukaryotes. Whoa, they were more complex. They led to our species. So this is in our biology for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's in us, this biology. So the eukaryotes could join for reproduction. They could tackle new duties. They could have division of labor. They were conscious of themselves and of others. And they could also merge in fusion to others and lose themselves. Something we still see today. So this leads to what we live with, which is the tension between wanting to be an individual and wanting to join together is a natural part of our species as a living thing. It's actually a tension. It's in us. It's in our biology. And so in that biology, we want to be distinct and seen as ourselves, differentiated. And it's in our biology to want to belong and to work together. These are just the basics of human beings. But the major relationship problem is preserving ourselves in close relationships. And so that's what I mean when I say authentic leadership. That's what I mean. It is so hard to truly be ourselves. So to be in close relationships with our staff and our parents, we have to preserve self. And that's where the tensions come in. And the doubts. Did I say that right? Did I do that right? So this was in the New York Times long ago. These are two fish looking at a community. And I actually blew this up on the copier, and every fish is unique. They're each different. They're hand-drawn. So the two fish say, I think that's a Montessori school. Well, what do you see? Everybody's going in their own direction, right? That's a perfect Montessori classroom. So this is what it looks like when you make visible what is invisible. This is what is invisible. The emotional field that is there among all of the humans, whether they're children or whether they're adults. There is an emotional field. When you work with top leadership gurus and they're teaching you how to work in a group, they will say, watch the field, observe the field. It's very interesting because there is this emotional field that runs through all of us when we're together. So the story is, long ago in the 50s, I'm going to tell the story of Murray Bowen. Dr. Murray Bowen was a psychiatrist who worked in Washington, D.C. at the National Institutes of Health, which is this big NIH institute. And he was given a huge grant to study people who suffered from schizophrenia. Do you know what that is? It's a very serious mental illness. And the discovery was one of the greatest discoveries in psychology, similar to Montessori's discovery of the child. He discovered that if he worked with the family and not with the patient, he left the patient alone, and he worked with the patient's family, and he helped the family to get clear about things and to understand what was happening and to be able to say for themselves how they felt about it, that the patient got better. Well, how did that happen? What he discovered is the emotional field that runs through humans and how that affects one another. And so the story that he would often tell is the story of cows. We know this is true. If you get one cow to go up to the fence and he gets hit by electricity, within 2 seconds, the whole herd of cows is anxious. That's the emotional field. And so you're not only doing all that other work you're doing in your school, but you are paying attention to yourself and how you are impacting the emotional field. That's a big responsibility. Yeah. And that's why working on oneself is so important. So, and that's why when parents get upset and they get a small group together and they go start talking about the school in a negative way, that has an effect on the emotional field of the school. That's what's going on. And it's so good to know this. It just so helps us deal with all these stresses. We understand what they are. So what Dr. Murray Bowen said is that getting relief from this relationship anxiety that we have, we do a bunch of things as humans. One of them is called triangling. Triangling is when you're bothered by someone, but you don't go and tell them. You go and tell somebody else. That's a triangle. And we all do it. It's natural. But when a group of people can come together and say, we're going to try really hard to not triangle with each other, let's try to be direct with one another, that can really improve a community. It can make things much healthier. At my school, we did that, and then we tried it, and it was so hard. So then we said, okay, we're going to keep trying, but we'll have a rule that we can go practice with someone. But when you went to practice with someone, to be able to prepare to tell someone that you were distressed about something, you had to promise that you were going to go to them. So at one point, I had an assistant in my school who needed to tell her guide something that was bothering her about what she did. And I decided I wasn't going to do it for her. She wanted me to do it for her. And I practiced with her for almost a year. And she finally did it. And it changed everything. It dissolved that tension. But she did it. And it changed her, made her stronger. So that's one of the things that we do, and that's a way to deal with it. We also cut off from people. We avoid them. We have conflict. We have over, under. You know, sometimes in partnerships, you have one that does all the work and one that says, okay. That's over, under functioning. And then one that is projecting. You know what projection is? Yep. And then there's also hurting or fusing. So those are all these psychological pieces to what goes on with humans in trying to get relief for being anxious. So the important thing is that we as leaders are well differentiated. We are present. We are who we are. That's Ricardo Montalban. and this is this is the well-differentiated leader we know and love. So that's a way of describing this whole concept of leadership. So here's a piece of what we see today in society. Parents micromanage. They are hypervigilant. They are data-driven. I heard somebody say, what's the percentage, of children who get into the next school? They rely on experts rather than their own common sense. They are fear-based, they tend to be. And they rebel when the leader takes a stand. If you tell a parent no, they will rebel oftentimes. And so that's all about this high rate of change and this more anxious society today than we have had in the past. Does that help you? It helps to validate what you're experiencing. So I'm going to not have quite enough time, I think. So this is a little exercise you can do with your staff. I'm not going to have you do it because we're going to run out of time. But you have people turn to partners and you ask. I could go to Peter and say, who are you?
Good question.
You're supposed to answer. Yes. And so that's quite a question. Who are you? Who are you? Yeah. And then the next thing you do is you ask each other, what do you stand for? You can do this with your teachers. And then when you experience life at its best, what do you notice about how you're feeling? What are you doing? Let's have one person just share. What do you, when you have life at its best, what do you notice about how you're feeling? What are you doing? Does anybody want to volunteer? Yes, okay.
I'm just in my physical presence, usually hiking or something, but I'm not thinking about what I'm thinking.
You're just in your body, out of your head and in your body, hiking in the mountains. Yeah. You all know where that place is. Yeah. For me, it is, it's being in my library with all my books. Because I'm a nerd. And I know it. Okay, and then another question you can ask with your teachers is, what talents or abilities do you possess when applying them give you a sense of rightness or wholeness? What is there that you do that makes you feel whole? A lot of teachers will say being in my classroom with my children, yes. But yeah, those are good questions to do with each other as an exercise. So sometimes I do them as an audience, and then they turn to each other as partners and do that. So there's another way to look at authentic leadership, being yourself, being self-differentiated, is to think about connection, how you connect. If you are clear, do you have clarity? And do you have calm? Everyone has to find their way to calm. It's in your own way that you can find that place in yourself to be calm. But those, as a leader, help to truly create that healthy community. So those three, clarity, connection, and calm, operate together to position us as a positive impact on the emotional field of the community and on ourselves. So that helps to balance reactivity, and it builds trust. Those are the keys, right there. So now I've pieced it all together so you understand what an emotional field is and how much that relies on you yourself, in how you are just yourself, in being clear and connected and calm. So that's part of building trust that's invisible. So what we know from living science is that all living things have a deep urge to thrive. We can rely on this. And actually, thriving is realized through self-organizing, not by being controlled. So thriving is the purpose of being alive. And this inner urge to thrive is fundamental to Montessori. Communities of people thrive when belonging and autonomy, being individual, and initiative are valued and encouraged. Having your own energy to act. So Montessori was ahead of her time. She knew that autonomy as a unique person was important. She differentiated every single child as they came in the door to the classroom, didn't she? The guide stands there and says, "Good morning. What are you going to choose today?" That's right there, the essence of that. And she knew that when you got to be yourself, that then you would have a sense of belonging to the whole community. And so that's what that social ecology is in a Montessori environment. So when you have both of these, you get peace. You get this sense of unity. We have spent a great deal of time, Sue and Mirka and Peter and I, thinking about how we want you to have a sense of belonging, but how we want each of you to be who you are and to have an opportunity to tell your story. That's why. That's why. Yes. So leadership came from the factory too, just like education. And the new sciences have transformed leadership, just as Montessori transformed education. So we need to help each other make visible what is and what needs to emerge so we can evolve and change and grow and develop. Schools need leadership that understands that role and asks those questions. That's what we're doing in the future, all of us together. And so I will end with Montessori's quote, "There is an essential principle of education. To teach details is to bring confusion. To establish the relationship between things is to bring knowledge."